When we have questions or we're struggling, we typically look to other people for help. For example, a book like this on how to succeed in the music business. Great at answering all those little questions about royalties, about management and deals. But when it comes to the modern music business in lockdown, which has some huge income streams like touring on hold, who can we turn to for advice, as it's not like this has regularly happened before? And that's why I wanted to create this video, to enlighten you and maybe help you along that journey of finding those pockets of income that you can leverage in the lockdown music business that you mightn't have heard of before. So let's get to it. Welcome, my name's Daniel Fish and I help people survive and thrive in music through helping them navigate the sometimes bumpy and, let's be honest, scary world of the music business. And whether you see the music business as a way of taking a hobby into a full-time career, or simply as a way of bringing in some income to buy that new synth or that new compressor, I don't know. But either way, it all comes down to the business of music. But the business of music has changed in the past year. For reasons I don't need to explain, gigs and the live scene has been put on hold. That, for some artists, is the biggest income stream which has caused issues. But if we take an industry like dance music, that's now a summer that has gone. That would have been ripe with festivals, with club nights, but also the Ibiza season, which for some artists, as well as booking agents and sound engineers, can be the majority of their income for a year. So in this video, I want to break down some not so typical income streams as a music producer or artist in music, and actually talk fundamentally of the two main ways you can monetize your music as an artist, and also a little bonus one which I'll cover at the end. And this video is my gift to you in return for you smashing that subscribe button and also hitting like, as it really helps me out in the YouTube algorithm. In this video, I'm going to break down different ways you can monetize your music, but in no way do I recommend you going after them all. If anything, research them and pick one or two to really focus on, as you don't want to be spending time on something that's not helping your artist project, whether that's with skills, experience, or even generating income. You want to build your ecosystem as an artist that really helps you build that momentum and really get focus on that direction you want to go down. And most of the channels are great for that. Before we move on though and take a bird's eye view of the fundamental ways that artists can monetize their music, I think we should get some perspective on the reality of the industry and how this has had a knock-on effect on different things. So I've spoken about gigs. That has had a knock-on effect on other parts of the industry. But the pandemic has had an impact on the film industry too. Big films have either been delayed or they're operating on socially distant kind of filming setups, which means they're taking longer to film. That then has a knock-on effect on sync deals, meaning there's less syncs around, meaning it's even tougher to get a sync deal. And it's well known two of the biggest income streams in the industry are touring, but also the sync and the music licensing and publishing world. So that's where we're at. And this is where I think it's important to take a step back and think of the fundamental ways that you can make money. And then later on in the video, we can talk about the specific avenues and channels and particular websites and platforms too that you could use within those channels. So before we get to the particular income streams, I first want to start off with a bird's eye view of the fundamental ways artists make money. It's two ways. There is a bonus, I'll be covering that at the end, but there are two main channels here, and they do sometimes cross over, as you'll see. But these are the two main ways of monetizing your music. So now, through breaking them down, I will also include the particular examples, the platforms for particular ways of making money, and hopefully guide you in a way of finding a pot of money that will work with your strengths as an artist and help you move forward. So let's take an artist. Let's say there are a music producer and a DJ who has just started performing live, but the pandemic's hit and they don't really know what to do. Before we get specific and talk about individual income streams, I think it's important we get a bird's eye view to think of the two individual channels that they can monetize, as then everything fits under one or the other. So the first is the musical assets, the music, the art that they create. And you might think, yeah, selling, streaming. I'm actually not talking about them in this video. I want to talk about alternative things that you either might not know or know how to do. So there's them. So the second channel you can monetize is your brand and audience. And you might think, I've only got a small audience. That actually doesn't matter that much. Of course, it matters in the scale of how much you can make, but you're not always directly selling to that audience. You can be using that audience to move your artist forward in different ways with different deals. It's not just directly selling a record to them. So we'll be covering both of those in a moment. And just as a reminder, by focusing on either channel, you are either way reinforcing your artist ecosystem by putting energy into your artist profile, in some senses diversifying as well, and improving your understanding of the music business as you go along. And especially if you haven't got a manager yet, and further down the line a manager comes in and sees how kind of entrepreneurial you've taken this, that can be a huge benefit. So now let's get to it and break down 3 different ways you can monetize either your musical assets or your brand and audience. And let's start with music. The first opportunity I want to talk about is licensing. And you might think, Dan, you literally said 5 minutes ago, big sync deals are really competitive at the moment. Not many films are being made, so there's all that kind of competition. That is true. But let's think, in a lockdown, what will people be doing with their time? And of course, they shouldn't be out socializing or out gathering, only really going out for shopping, meaning they're spending most of their time inside. So that is when content has boomed, especially over the first lockdown in the UK. YouTube, Netflix, all the consumption was up. And there is an opportunity for you to pitch your music to licensing to these content creators, whether it is documentaries, whether it's films, TV shows, video podcasts, YouTube videos, any sort of content or media, the opportunity is there. And with smaller projects, these aren't huge lump sums. These can be regular smaller projects. So how can you get access to these? Let's talk about great platforms. So the first platform that we could cover is Syncer or syncermusic.com. Think of it as a database of briefs. No, not the underwear of musical briefs that music supervisors and content creators and directors and advertisers are looking for music for their particular project, which in return they will pay a license fee. Platforms like Syncer have a huge database of opportunities there which describe the kind of music, and through their platform you can actually pitch to them. In return, some platforms will take a cut, but typically the cut's not that much for you already producing that music. And before I talk about other platforms here, it's important you own the rights to your music and have music publishing set up. So what other platforms are there like Syncer Music? So you've got taxi.com, which is a bit broader. Then you've got Songtrader, which has the ability of Syncer, but also with music distribution involved. And then you've got other platforms like MusicBed. There's a lot out there, and just by searching music licensing or sync deals or music sync deals, a lot can come up. And I definitely recommend checking them out, as it's a way of monetizing the music you've already created. So we've covered the first income stream that you could monetize as an artist with music you've already finished. Number 2 in the musical assets is pretty similar, but is in a pretty similar world, but with other music. So we've spoken about music you've already finished. What about those unfinished tracks you've got on your hard drive? I've been there, I've done the same. For every track I probably finished, there was probably 30, 40, 50 unfinished that were just sat there. And some of them were because it didn't fit in with my artistic direction. But what if you were to finish those tracks? Not attach them to your artist, as I say, but as a composer, gaining licenses from content for that music. And this is different to Syncer and other platforms. Because let's think YouTubers. Let's think podcasts. How many YouTubers and podcasts do you know use music? And chances are, because they use so much quite regularly, they don't have huge sync deals on Syncer. They will typically use a platform that allows them a subscription where they get so many licenses a month of the music on that platform. And that's where you can turn unfinished tracks into assets for you to monetize passively online. Could be while you're asleep, generate some income from the content creators that use them. In a similar way, when your track's on Spotify, someone pays a subscription and you get a little tiny bit of that subscription. With some of these platforms, you get paid for when someone uses your track on YouTube on a podcast. And not just they download a license and get to use it regularly, it is a license per usage. So it can add up. And not only are you finishing your tracks and monetizing them, you're building the habit of finishing tracks, which helps. So when one of those ideas flows, you can get a track finished even quicker because you've built that as a habit. So the two platforms I'm going to recommend here are ones I personally use as a content creator. One for my podcast and one for the video and some sound effects that you may have seen in this video alone, that allow music makers to pitch themselves to be on the platform and provide their music in return for the royalties from music licenses that people use. So one platform I'm going to recommend here is Soundstripe. They do have an application process, so it's not instantly upload your tracks, but they do have a great but not extensive library of electronic music specifically. And as you'll probably hear on the podcast, they use the same track quite regularly, which on that note is a new license every time that's used, more income. But it's a great opportunity for electronic music makers and dance music makers to go on that platform. And that platform is used by not just podcasters, but a lot of people in media. So I'd recommend checking that out. So another platform I'd recommend you checking out is Motion Array. The only reason I also recommend this one is because I use it myself. I actually pay money for these two platforms, Soundstripe and Motion Array. And I think that's a good kind of indicator of it actually being a successful platform. But Motion Array also have a opportunity for you to put stock music, non-exclusive as well, on their platform and generate revenue from it, which is great. Some little caveats here to just keep an eye on is exclusivity. If you sign up to, for example, Soundstripe, are you only allowed to put your music on Soundstripe? Is it exclusive with them? And also the royalty rate and kind of the amount of people who use the platforms. There are a whole range out there now, for example, Artlist, Epidemic Sound, a lot out there. So I'd recommend doing your research. And if there are a lot of non-exclusive ones versus an amazing exclusive one, weigh it up and see what the platform's actually like. For example, with Soundstripe, there's not much electronic and dance music on there. Is there a market for that if it is exclusive? It's something you'll have to weigh up. But please let me know if you do go down that route, as you never know, I might use your track on your music industry podcast. So we've covered 1 and 2 of monetizing your musical assets, which have been around content, whether it's with sync deals or with the stock music side of things of licensing. But a third is stepping away from content and taking a look at your strengths and your mastery and understanding and experience of music production. And I'd like to ask you the question, what is your strength in music? Let me know in the comments, what is your strength in your musical craft? If it's sound design, if it's composition, if it's arrangement, there's different ways you could monetize that craft and bring in some income through making musical products based around that. Let's say you're a wizard on sound design. You could take your favorite synth and make preset packs for different genres or what you know best. Let's say you're an absolute wizard at composition and the musicality side of things. You could make MIDI packs. Or let's say, as another example, you just love field recording samples. You could make your own sample pack. And from that, you could reach out to companies like Loopmasters or Sample Magic. There's so many now. And pitch them your product. That then will create passive income through, once the product is released, that could either be an advance, which is upfront, or royalties on that release, which could go beyond just the release date. And I hope you're seeing that despite gigs disappearing for a few months, meaning there's less money in the music economy, meaning less remix fees, there are still huge opportunities out here for you to build assets that can bring in some revenue, whether it is from content creators or other music makers. It's all out there and an exciting opportunity. So we've now covered 3 ways of monetizing your musical assets in the lockdown music business. And the Daniel that's talking to you right now is not the same Daniel that you've just been hearing from. I'm a fair few hours older. And that's because I've been editing this video and I've realized how big it is. And I knew it was going to be big, but not the potential of like half an hour to 40 minutes long, which isn't really practical. So I've decided to break it down into a 3-part series, with this now being the end of the first part, as I didn't want to start cutting anything away from what I've recorded and any value and understanding you might miss out on. So because of that, it is a 3-part series. So the next part will release in line with my YouTube content schedule, which is 1 p.m. UK time every Monday. And if you're watching this and it's already out, you'll see it in the recommended section or in the end screens in front of you now. So if you have liked this video, please do hit that subscribe button to get more content like this in the future, and also ding the bell to get a notification when my next video drops. I'd also like you to leave in the comments what particular thing you've learned from this video. Is it a platform? Is it an income stream? I don't know. Let me know in the comments, because I'd love to hear from you. So you'll be hearing from me on part 2 of this series. So until then, stay safe.